Welcome to Fungos and Footnotes, the podcast where baseball meets the deeper side of the game. This show is for players, parents, and coaches who care about more than just box scores. We talk development, recruiting, mindset, leadership, and the lessons baseball teaches us that last long after the final out. Because the game shapes you and the footnotes matter. Let's get into it. Welcome back to this episode of the Fungos and Footnotes podcast. I'm your host, Addison Williams, alongside co-host Coach T. We're excited about today. We're going to talk about not just good practices, but we're going to talk about great practices and what great coaches do differently inside and outside whenever it comes to practice. So let's set it up with this. Most youth practices today look busy, but they're not actually productive. Lines, standing around, one kid working and 10 kids watching. And all the parents are like, what's happening? And we wonder why development is slow. The truth is, great teams don't just practice more, they practice better. And today we're going to talk about the goal of a practice. The goal of a great practice isn't just about activity and going through the motions. We all hear that all the time. It's about development through legitimate reps, decision-making, and game-like environments. So to break up this podcast episode, we're going to break it up into two main categories, inside practices and outside practices. And in both of those scenarios, we are going to give you, the listener, not only developmental things to think about, but ways to structure your practice to maximize those hour inside practices or 2-hour outside practices. And so, Coach T, let's talk with the inside practice first. If kids are standing around, they're not developing. So let's first talk about eliminate standing around. How do you structure an inside practice to maximize efforts for your players?
No doubt. So two things happen when you're standing around. A, we're not using our time effectively. And B, the guys that aren't involved, they start, chitter chattering. And look, human nature, they're kids. They like their teammates, their buddies. So if we get a little bit of that chitter chatter going and we start to lose our focus. So the quality of our practice goes down on top of the fact that we're not maximizing our time. So let's say we're going to hit. We got to hit indoors. We get one cage. Now, depending on the length of our cage, I'll make the investment. If the facility that I'm using doesn't have it available, I'll make the investment for my team. The pop-up net, you can carry it easily. It shrinks down to a small size. You can easily throw it in your vehicle if you're a coach and you're coaching a youth team. We're talking about youth practice here. Throw that pop-up net down. So I'm going to move the L screen to the far end of the cage. And I'm going to put the pop-up net 15, 20 feet away from the edge of that. And that's going to be for live hitting. Now I'm going to run if I don't have an assistant coach, if I'm just a dad coaching my kids' rec team and I don't have a lot of helpers, or maybe I don't have an assistant coach there that night. I'm going to run that section where I'm doing the front toss or the short BP. Now, it's short BP or it's front toss. We're not going to get a lot of foul balls. That net is behind that hitter to really separate and stop the balls that they don't swing at. Because, again, we're not going to get a lot of foul balls there. And the ones we do are not going to have any juice on them because it's just short BP or front toss. So behind that, working my way back down the cage, depending on how much room I have, I can set up a couple or three tees in there. And I'm going to, when I set my groups up, I've got a tee feeder and somebody hitting. So when I rotate, I'm rotating one spot at a time. So the kids are going to go from hitter to feeder to hitter to feeder to hitter to feeder, working their way up the tees. And then they're going to be in the live section, a front toss or short overhand BP. Now, I can probably if I can get 3 tees in the cage safely where I have enough room, they're hitting the tees into the side. So they're hitting into the side net where the live hitter is hitting to the end of the cage. Then I can get 7 kids in the cage safely. If I have a really big cage, I could get 9 kids in there. And then If I have another coach handy, we can do bullpen at the same time, hopefully, if the facility that we're working at has a bullpen or we have the opportunity to get in there. So I'll have a pitcher and a catcher in the bullpen. That's 11 players. Most youth teams have about 12 kids. If I can't get the bullpen at the same time, and I'm going to have to divide my time between half hitting cage and then half bullpen, no problem. In a small area outside of the cage, I'm going to come up with some kind of creative activities. And it could be something simple. It could be push-ups. It could be crunches. It could be some dumbbell workouts for their forearms, some hand crunchers you can get at Walmart for pretty inexpensive. If I have more room, it could be a jump rope, any type of activity that is going to help in terms of, look, jump rope's going to help. All infielders, baseball players, athletes, jump rope it's a useful activity. I'm not wasting my time. It helps with their coordination, their explosiveness, foot speed, agility. So I'm not asking those kids to do something it's not like we're in there doing some kind of a crazy activity that's not going to correlate in the baseball world. So I'm going to come up with creative side activities that I can do for those last 3 or 4 kids. And then that way I've got every kid at a station, every kid working, and all we're doing is changing stations. And the boring part of it might be really just feeding the tee. Well, they're only doing that, and then they're going immediately to hitting at the next tee station. And then they're going to feed the tee again and then go to hitting. So it keeps them pretty active and pretty locked in. And they're working with a different player on the team at each separate station and moving around. And so when that happens, you typically build some team chemistry. All the kids start to buddy up instead of having some cliques of 2 or 3 kids here or 2 or 3 kids there. And so I feel like you can maximize your time, maximize the reps, keep those kids going in a short period of time in a singular cage. Most teams and coaches, when they think inside practice, they want 2 or 3 cages. And so that'll work on the offensive side. So now, certainly we have more aspects to practice, so we can hit those as well.
Absolutely.
Offensively, I kind of like to set up that way.
Absolutely. It's great. And just to hone in on a couple of things, one thing that I want to highlight on Coach T is what you said. Every kid has a role. There's either an active role in hitting or there's kind of a back end role of feeding the balls. But the most important thing is you're staying active, you're staying engaged, multiple groups, everybody's rotating. And quite frankly, in an hour practice, if you've got, let's just break it down, you've got 4 drills, you've got the live, and then you've got 2 or 3 tees. That's a really solid practice because they're in and out. It's not that a baseball practice has to be 3 hours to be effective. It's like going to the gym for 2 hours, but you can just go to the gym for 35 to 45 minutes and really get after it and maximize efforts. That's the same thing that we're talking about here. If you've got 12 kids and one drill going, you're wasting about 80% of your practice. So let's hone in on the dynamic that Coach T is talking about, which is maximize what you've got. If you've got 1 cage, make the most of it. If you don't have 3 tees, if you're balling on a budget, that's okay. Do soft toss instead. You can still line the cage sideways to do soft toss and then put up that divider net. You can still do it live, but then maximize the opportunity. So Coach T, let's talk about, I know that we've talked about hitting. We're going to definitely jump into inside like bullpens and really the mind game there. But one thing that I would just like to toss up to you is if we wanted to maximize 1 cage, but we wanted to do defense and offense at the same time, would you offer up that it would be okay to do short hops behind the net and kind of spice things up that way?
Absolutely. So you can have, instead of your tee stations, you can have short hops. I did want to mention, because I kind of blew by it there real quick, on those tee stations, if I got 2 or 3 stations in the cage, I'm going to do a different drill on each tee. Maybe top hand, lead hand, maybe stop at contact, maybe stop at extension, a variety of drills. And if we're going to have time where we're going to run the whole team through maybe 2 rounds, then if I have 3 tees, then I'm going to come up with 6 drills so that every time they hit the tee, it's a different drill. Keep it fresh, keep it engaging for the player. But yes, if you want to mix in some, if you have a short period of time and you got to hit and field kind of at the same time, man, you can, if you have, just get you another divider net if you want. You can do a couple of tees or a tee and a hit live hitting part and some short hops. And then the short hop part, if you're going crossways on the cage, man, you could probably get 2 or 3 groups in there so that you could get 4 or 6 kids working short hops, 2 kids hitting on a tee, 1 kid hitting live, and only have a couple of kids outside working on, like I said, some push-ups or crunches or, some arm care work, some bands, dumbbell, whatever. And so absolutely, you could even mix that in as a station.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's good. So, Coach T, we've talked about hitting, we've talked a little bit about defense. Let's talk about bullpens from an inside perspective. Most bullpens, I was a pitcher, I get it. They become robotic, and it's more going through the motions more than it is competitive and game like. So, whenever it comes to bullpens during a practice, what is some good advice that you would share for that?
Well, first thing I think when we're just talking about general bullpens, team setting, indoors, we got rained out, whatever. So we're indoors. Most coaches' teams, they tell the pitchers, hey, we got bullpen. We get a catcher ready and slide them over there. The pitcher is going to do about 90% of their bullpen from the windup. And in reality, it's a mindset. And in my opinion, I don't have any data necessarily to back it up, but I think we need to do a larger percentage of our bullpen from the stretch. And the reason being is in the game, when we have to make those critical pitches, there's runners on base. So we need to make sure we're getting plenty of work from the stretch in the bullpen. We need to emphasize to our pitchers slide step so that sometimes we're going full lift. Maybe there's a runner at second and we can go full lift because we've showed them an inside move at second and we've got them on their heels paying attention and watching for that inside move. And so we can go full lift. Totally fine. But we also are going to have some opportunities, some times when we have a really good runner at first and we're going to have to slide step. And so I think we need to emphasize to our pitchers when we're doing bullpen, certainly the intensity level of our bullpen needs to be a certain notch, but we need to have some wind up, some stretch, some slide step. And then let's talk about intensity. Kids throw good in the bullpen, and then they get in the game and they don't throw well. It can be 2 things where a guy really performs well in the pen and then he really struggles in the game. Number 1, it can be fear of contact or having the hitter in there. If I've got room in my bullpen when I'm working, I want a hitter in there. 2 things. Number 1, my pitcher gets comfortable with a hitter in there. I'm talking about young kids again, but also the hitter, they can work on their rhythm and their timing, work on their vision while they're in there. They're not hitting the ball, but there are plenty of things that they can work on. They can work on picking the ball up out of the hand, the fastball versus the breaking ball, and how the ball flight plays in. So I think if we have that ability, that's an important factor to put in there. And I can tell you, those hitters, after they do that a little bit, you can ask that hitter, hey, did you get your foot down on time or was your foot late? And they can tell you, oh man, I was late on that one. Or man, I was all over that one. And then what you're going to find is when they got their foot down in time, they're going to tell you, I could have smashed that pitch because it aids in their vision. It gives their brain more time to process because they see in the ball farther out, they got their foot down better. So if you have that room, we definitely need to do that. But another reason players struggle, I think, in the game, they're great in the pen, they struggle in the game, intensity level. In the bullpen, most guys are going about, and I'm talking about in season. We got our arms in shape. We're healthy. We're doing our between start or between outing bullpen. Most guys' intensity in the bullpen is about 80 or 90%. And they get in the game and they're 102 or 105%. And so what happens is That's totally different feel of the ball coming out of the hand. That's a totally different movement. Granted, my mechanics may be very, very similar, may not even be any discernible difference, but the effort level changes everything. The speed I'm working down the mound. So I think we need to find a way to stress to our pitchers and to our players that bullpen needs to be 105, game needs to be 95. So if in the game I'm working at 95 and I need a little bit extra because this guy's fouled off a couple of fastballs and I really need to put a little extra on it, but I don't want to just, throw it up arm side and hit the guy, I can go back up to 105, maybe sneak it by him without losing command because I worked my bullpen at a much higher intensity level than what I actually need to do in the game. The problem is we do it in reverse. So when we get in the game and we're really putting high effort in because it's the game, I don't have the same command. I do believe that is a large part of why kids throw well in the bullpen and struggle in the game. And I think we can address that in bullpen with intensity level and just having a conversation with your kids. So, and we got to work, wind up, stretch, slide step.
Absolutely. Coach T, you talked about the internal competition of being competitive during a bullpen or even hitting, taking control of the game. But, just to preface everything that you've said, tie a bow on it here, is it creates healthy internal competition from the team perspective as well. Because if you've got guys throwing bullpens and you've got a hitter standing in, well, if you throw a breaking ball that's right over the middle of the plate, that hitter is going to say something to that pitcher, like healthy banter. Yeah, it's like, man, that would have gone 450 feet,
Yeah.
That would have been Yahtzee.
Another part on the bullpen too, I think that we miss from the coaching standpoint all the time. We need to, and again, if we have time, we're inside because of poor weather or whatever, and we're constrained by time because if it is poor weather, a lot of other teams are going to need to come in, and whatever facility we're using probably is only going to give us an hour and a half or something because they're going to try to fill all their cages up. And I get that. But we got to work on all of our pickoff moves. I said, well, Coach, how do I do my pickoff moves when I'm in a bullpen with one mound? Right. Well, it's pretty easy. The mound in the game slopes in all directions. So when I make my pickoff move to first base, I'm working downhill. So I don't have to stand right on the pitching rubber, but I can turn around where my back is in the direction of the catcher and work on my spin move to first base. And that is exactly the same footing feel and everything. The only difference is I don't have the pitching rubber there, but I can work on my technique, my footwork, and I can work my pick to first and still feel that downhill feel like I would feel in the game. Same to second, same to third. I just position my body accordingly. Granted, I'm only throwing the ball in one direction because I'm in a cage, but as long as I position my body properly, like I'm a right-handed pitcher, so third base is in front of me. So if I'm working down the cage using the cage in the background here, I'll just work this way. So I'm working on my move to third right here. And so I'm adjusting my body for the direction that I need to throw. So we got to get all of our pick moves in. We need to work on those. Third, first move, all of those things. Inside move, quick move, your pick at first. And then, quite frankly, if we're, from the coaching standpoint, if we use it, right, teams don't use it much anymore, but if we use it, the pitch out, right, or modified pitch out, which would be, I used almost exclusively modified pitch out. I'm going to throw an extended fastball with a slide step, but I'm not going to throw it up so my catcher stands up. I want to use the modified pitch out because I don't want to if I feel like I know what the signs are or the situation, I don't want to let the other team know that maybe I know by throwing a regular pitch out where my catcher comes out and stands up. Because now the coach may go back and change his signs or he may change his pattern. I'm pretty bad about it. I run on the second pitch a lot. If it's 1-0 or 0-1, depending on the pitcher's tendency, maybe they come back with a breaking ball there. I run on that count a lot. So if you just looked at if we have a doubleheader and you watched, closely the whole first game and you saw that I ran on, the second pitch a lot, you might throw a modified pitch out on the second pitch and I might not catch it. If you throw a regular pitch out on the second pitch, I'm going to know that, hey, man, he's on to my liking of running on that second pitch. So, but we need to practice those in the bullpen, right? We need to go pitch out right-hand batter, pitch out left-hand batter with the slide step. If we're going to ask the kid to do it in the game, well, you got to practice on it. And, invariably, here's what happens. We may talk about it and never practice on it. We may have a sign for it and never practice on it. And then in the game, when we call it, they throw it away. And invariably, most coaches are going to get after those guys for that. And, when in reality, we didn't practice on it. And there's been times when early in the summer league is different, for me, because we don't have a lot of practice time on that high school summer league. And there have been times where we, I had to go to the mound and say, okay, we're going to try this. And we haven't practiced on it yet. And, hey, we butcher it up. Well, you know what? I can't get after those guys for that because we haven't practiced on it. So I think we have to find ways to utilize that bullpen for all aspects of pitching. So wind up, stretch, slide step, pickoff moves, pitch outs. We're going to ask those pitchers to do that over the course of the season. We need to practice it every time we throw bullpen.
Absolutely. It's like from a hitting perspective, we're working on full range of motion, hitting, stop at contact, lead hand, backhand, everything that we're doing from the hitting perspective, we're telling you guys to do that from a pitching perspective too, because you have to utilize the full craft of pitching and understand that it's not just throwing to the catcher, right? It's exactly what you're talking about, T, but I'm just going to bring it back 30,000 foot view. We're talking about tempo, control of the game, fielding, and leveraging your position, pitch out, holding runners, and ultimately competing and giving your efforts in practice.
Right. Routine, breathing, having that repeatable routine. Now, we are going to have a really good episode on throwing more strikes, catch play, and all of the things that go along with that. But yeah, just maintaining that routine is vitally important.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you guys have heard a lot of great ways to craft a practice on the inside elements of the cages, leveraging one cage to its full capacity, which, it's whenever you think of one cage, it's like, oh man, I need like 3 cages to do everything I want to do. But the reality is you can use one cage for multiple uses. So hopefully you guys, listeners, gathered some really good insights on how to maximize cage time, but also bullpens as well. So Coach T, we talked about inside practice. Let's talk about outside practice, because that's where I think the intensity of practice does get lost. You're on a bigger field. You think that you have to field all positions at all times, and that leads to a lot of standing around. And so
no doubt,
let's talk about building game ready players for outside practices as well. So let's talk about the balance between, because I think this is where the hang up is. We think team environment, team practice, outside, everybody's got to be working together. So let's set it up like this. Let's talk about the balance between team setting outside and then individual work outside. Let's bring the two together so that we maximize a 2-hour practice on the field.
Okay, so on team setting, I'm going to break my practice up into 4 parts. Equal time pretty much between those 4, but it can vary if I really have to bear down on a particular thing because maybe we're struggling in that department. But reps, I've got to make sure my guys are getting plenty of ground ball, fly ball, repetition, and throwing with, relays, throwing the ball across the diamond, turning double plays, catchers throwing to their positions, reps. So about a third of my practice is going to be rep oriented, where we're going to put the guys out there positionally. And if possible, I'm going to get multiple feeds going. So if I have coaches that can hit fungo, I'm going to get multiple fungos going. If I could get one fungo for every position on the rep phase of practice, where I'm not doing a lot of throwing, I'm just doing a lot of fielding, that's what I'm going to do. In other words, if I could get 4 fungos going on the infield and we're not throwing to the base, we're just fielding the ball, putting it in the bucket, we're maximizing our rep time, then that's what I'm going to do. If I can get 3 fungos in the outfield going, then that's what I'm going to do. Now, when it's time to move into the throwing, right, I may cut those fungos down some because we're going to be fielding the ball and throwing. So I've taken away, if I'm throwing the ball to first from third base, then, I'm not necessarily hitting fungo to first at that moment. Those first basemen are over there taking those throws. But when I'm working on the rep phase of practice, I want to try to maximize my time. If I don't have a lot of guys available for fungo on that particular night, then I might roll the balls or have the catcher roll a ball. So we're doing a slow roller with one guy, and I'll usually go rapid fire on the fungo where I can go fungo, pull the ball out of my pocket, go fungo, and gather up 2 more balls. Then we get a slow roller, fungo, pocket, fungo. So I try to keep that thing rolling pretty quick, but recruit some guys that can hit some fungo for you. Or if you want to work on slow rollers all the way, you can go roll. But we're maximizing reps for about 1/3 of our practice. And that's because the game is repetitive. If we want to get good. Now, are we getting a ton of quality there where we might, this fielder is absolutely getting fundamentally better? We're not having a lot of time to break down the fundamentals there on that particular part. That is what you're talking about, a little bit difference between individual and team-oriented thing, right? So, and I may need to spend some time before or after the game with a group or practice with a group of, 2 or 3 guys where I can really dig down on some fundamental work. But 1/3 of my practice is going to be pretty rep-oriented.
Yeah, that's good. And I would just highlight guys that are thinking through, oh, well, Coach T talked about hitting the ground ball to third base and he was thrown across to first base. Well, what's the second baseman and shortstop doing in that moment? Well, you can have another guy hitting fungo to the shortstop and the second baseman. They can be working on double play balls. So we're maximizing the opportunity in the infield. So just to double down on what you said, T, I wanted to say, hey, what about this second baseman and shortstop when you're throwing balls to first base from the third baseman?
They can work on the double play feeds, 100%. So get those guys going. So third baseman's going across, shortstop's going to second baseman's working on his receiving footwork. If you've got a screen, you can divide that distance up between second and first, and you can have the second baseman actually throw the ball to the guy in the screen, but the screen protects the first baseman that's taking the throw from third. So if you don't have a screen, then we're just not going to make the double play throw in this section of our practice. We're just going to work on those feeds over there and our footwork. So, but yeah, we can keep all of those players active for sure.
Absolutely.
And here's the thing. When we're talking about youth baseball, I don't rat hole kids into you're an outfielder, you're an infielder. So my outfield guys are standing around. Hey, everybody has primary position, secondary position. And we're in our rep section. Hey, we're going to go about half of that allotted time on our primary position on the infield. And if I'm an outfielder, I'll have a primary infield position. It may be my secondary position as a player, but right, that may be third. Well, when it's time to switch, maybe I stay there because I don't really play another spot, or maybe I'll play some first. I want to make sure those guys are moving around and getting a feel for every position. Granted, left-handed guys don't have a lot of options. If I've got a big, strong guy that doesn't move tremendously well laterally, and he's going to be a corner player, then maybe he spends most of his time at third base or first base, whatever the case may be. But I definitely want to try to move those guys around, and I don't want to say, okay, well, outfielders you guys go hit in the cage while we do infield. I'm not into that at the youth level. I may do that on the college level, but I'm definitely not doing that on the youth level. And then when we go to outfield, guess what? Everybody's going to get fly balls. I mean, even the guys that are corner guys that maybe they don't move too well, they're going to get fly balls too, right? You can get a fly ball at any position on the field. So it's not going to hurt those guys to go out there and catch a few fly balls, even if they're not ever really going to play out there. It's just being a baseball player.
So. Absolutely.
Now, after we finish that 1/3 of our practice is pretty rep heavy, now I'm going to get into some more team oriented stuff. And that can be where we're actually doing the full double plays. Catchers are throwing to the bases. Maybe we're doing pitcher fielding practice. Maybe we're doing bunt coverages. Definitely want to do relays because I've done some throwing on the infield with the infielders during our rep part of practice, but I really want to work those outfielders as well doing some throwing. Now I'm pretty mindful of throwing at the youth level because I ask all of my youth players to pitch some. So we're going to have bullpens, we're going to have practice, and we're going to have games. And so I don't want to beat those guys down on their practice reps if they're going to throw a couple of times a week. And when I say a couple of times a week, I'm talking about bullpen and game. I rarely threw guys on Saturday and Sunday together. I usually split that up as a one-day guy, but we have to do some relay work. And so, we need to mix all of that in. And I try to make it different each day. I'm not doing a little bit of PFP and a little bit of pickoffs and a little bit of bunt coverages and a little bit of first, third. I'm not doing that every day. I'm going to divide that up. I'm going to do a lot of it, but I'm going to divide it up. So one day, that third of practice, so it could be, 40 minutes or so. Hey, that's going to be 40 minutes of heavy duty PFP and bunt coverage. And everyone's going to participate in one way, shape, or form. And so I think where, we mess up as coaches is we don't include what I'm going to call the third part of practice. And that third, don't get me wrong, we have to do bunt coverage, first, third, pickoffs, relays, those aspects of the game. We've got to cover those. Those have to be in. Nothing is more embarrassing to your players or even you as a coach if you're unprepared for that situation and it pops up in the game. So, and I think where most of young coaches make a huge mistake is the third part of practice where we're really building instinct and we're really working on situational stuff. This gets glossed over. And what I mean by that is we don't dig down into the situations of the game and we don't simulate that game action in practice. And I told you I broke my practices into 4 parts. So the first 2 parts are 1/3 of the practice. This part is going to be half of 1/3 of practice. Now I could extend that if multiple situations came up where we really just had a poor response to it. And but the reason this is important is we keep the scenarios of the game going game speed and we're building instinct. When the ball is hit, the player, they react instinctively immediately. And so we have to build that instinct. And I'm going to give you a great example. You're a big league team. You got an entire pitching staff of 10-year veterans. You go to spring training. One of the first things you're going to do, ground balls to the right side, pitcher getting over. Now, do you think those 10-year veterans need that? Those guys have been that has been beaten into their head since they, broke into, to pro ball. But, pro baseball, the game of baseball, it's been around well over 150 years. They have figured out over time that creating instinct is a repetitive nature. And so even though those 10-year veterans have covered first 80 million times, they're going to do it when they get to spring training because that is the best way. So, and let me give you an example of where we mess up as coaches on instinct. I'm going to take the second baseman as an example. When the kids are little, ball gets hit to right field, second baseman runs out there and puts his hands up. He becomes the relay man. Now we're developing and building that instinct into that player. Okay. But in reality, there's a man on first base and the ball gets hit to right field. We don't want the second baseman running out there and setting that relay up. He's got his back to the runner. He has no idea where that runner is. And typically, when the players get older, your right fielder is going to be one of your better armed players. Your second baseman is probably going to be one of your lesser armed players. And so you want your shortstop to handle that relay. The shortstop can slide in there where he can see the runner running in front of him, doesn't have his back to the play. So he knows if he needs to cut the ball or relay the ball based on the timing of where the runner came. So the second baseman makes a play on the ball, and then he recovers and takes second. Well, the problem is when they're young, we let them get away with it and build that instinct, and now that's what they do. And granted, when we work on relays and the shortstop takes that relay and the second baseman just kind of stands over there out of the way, let's be real here. That guy's got to recover if he made a play for the ball and take the bag. Because what happens if the shortstop cuts it? I may have a play behind that runner at first, or he may be looking for two. If I do a good job decoying the relay to third, the guy that hit the ball may try to take second. And we're not going to see this scenario a lot in youth ball when we're talking about younger kids, but we need to be able to cut the ball and flick the ball over there to second baseman and get that batter runner out. And that's a vitally important part of the game when the kids get older, yet we've drilled in poor instinct at a young age, and we've never gone back and corrected it. And so when I say we're going to do some instinctive activities at practice, I'm going to set that scenario up with runners, and I'm going to hit some balls. And I'm going to hit some balls the second baseman can cut off and take the out at first. And I'm going to hit some balls that get through, and that guy's going to have to run back over there and cover that bag. And I'm going to have those runners. Hey, let's read the ball off the bat. Let's make sure we know where that right fielder is, and we can see the ball off the bat, and we know the right fielder is going to have to make a run for it. Laterally, I got a chance to make it to third. So the runners can get some practice on it. The defenders can get some practice on it, and we can rebuild that instinct. Because as soon as the ball gets hit in the game, they react how they've reacted their entire life, because that's instinctual. Now, you can talk to the kids after the game about this very scenario, and they're like, oh, yeah. It goes right in. They calculate it out. They understand. But as soon as the ball's hit, they get caught instinctively because there's no time to think when the ball is live. So as coaches, we have to create all types of scenarios. There's an infinite number of scenarios that can happen in the game, but we need to do our best to create the most popular ones. And I always kept a notebook with me in my pocket. Anytime something came up that we hadn't practiced on, I wrote it down in my notebook, and hey, we would recreate that scenario. So great example. Everybody watching this episode has seen it before. And I've been guilty of it myself when I, first got into coaching. Hey, we're doing infield, and we're going to do some situational infield stuff. All right, guys, man on second base, and we hit a ground ball to third baseman. The third baseman fields it, and he looks at that guy, and boom, he throws the ball to first base. Now in the game, there is a runner on second, and we get a ground ball to the third baseman, and he fields it, and he gives the old customary glance over there, and boom, throws it to first base, and the dude's running right at him the whole time, and we're like, whoa, he didn't see that guy. We trained the kid to just give the customary look and throw to first base because we did it in practice with no runner. We got to go back and drill in some realistic instinct. Now, the only way to do that is you put some guys on second and you tell those guys, you get to third without making an out on this play. Make it competition. And then you tell that third baseman, hey, you do not let the guy get to third, but you have to get an out. So it can be the guy at first because you looked him back, or you pump faked him and you caught him off and you got him out. We have to build that instinct. Kids don't play enough ball, wiffle ball, sandlot ball. They don't play enough in today's world to naturally pick those instincts up. Now, there are some kids that do, but they're so few. But as coaches, we can build that for those kids. We can help those kids along that line. And quite frankly, if we are doing our job as coaches and fully preparing our team, then we need to do some of this activity. This has to be a regular staple in our practice. And that's going to be 1/3 or less than 1/3 of my practice time. And I'm going to keep those scenarios down to 1 or 2 scenarios, maybe 3, depending on, how quickly we catch it, because I'm trying to develop and build some instinct And if I'm able to combine it, like we talked about the runner on second, ground ball third, or ground ball, and even our runner, hey, we can hit some ground balls toward the runner, behind the runner, in front of the runner, because how many times have you seen a ground ball to the shortstop in the 6 hole over there by third, and the guy at second's running, and the shortstop can just flip it over there and we just got done telling the kid, hey, ground ball in front, you stay there, ground ball behind, you run. You see it all the time. Again, we haven't practiced on it enough. His instinct is when they're little and the ball gets hit and he runs over there to third, the shortstop doesn't field it, or if the shortstop gets to it, he doesn't throw the ball to first because they don't have a good enough arm strength, and they don't throw the ball to third because they haven't practiced it, and so the kid is safe. So he ran on the ground ball in front of him, and he was safe, and he did it 4 or 5 times growing up, and then it becomes instinctual that it's okay, and then they get older, and the coach says, hey, ground ball front, you got to stay, you got to see it through, and ground ball gets hit in the hole, and he takes off running, and the shortstop picks it and flips it over to third, and then he's out because it hadn't happened to him enough. He hadn't been in that situation enough. So we have to drive that instinct home. And then my last part of practice has to be competitive competition. Kids will raise their level of competition and really get after it against their teammates harder than they will in an actual game. Now, if I can make a game out of the instinctual deal, I'll do that the whole 1/3. If I'm unable to make a game out of the instinct driving part of my practice, then I'm going to have some sort of a game at the end. Tee game, bunt game, something like that. I want to finish with some fun and some competition, teach these kids how to compete. I don't think players actually know how hard they can compete until they're out there having fun against their buddies and really competing. And I don't think kids understand how hard they can push themselves and how hard they can work when they get older. I know right now, the NCAA tournament's going on, and there's a lot of buzz on social media about coaches coaching kids hard and coaching, players hard. I think we should probably mix that in on an episode here. But, I'm a believer in most players don't know how hard they can go because they don't get pushed hard enough because coaches might be a little timid about that. So I think we ought to make an episode out of that, maybe even our next episode. But anyway, I think for my outdoor practice, as long as I'm doing rep-oriented, situational-oriented, and then the team-oriented stuff like bunt coverage, relays, rundowns, first and third situations, as long as I'm breaking my practice up into those 3 parts, and then I'm having some fun and some competition and some real good instinct driving activities in there, then we're going to have a high-quality, high-intensity practice.
That's so good, Coach T. And, the most important thing that you've said a lot of great things, but it's teaching players how to think instead of not just what to do. I think it's very easy to be a dad coaching a youth team, and you, quite frankly, might not know all of this stuff, but that's why we want to hone in and give you the opportunity to hear what successful practices looks like, especially from the youth perspective. When you tap into the reps, the teamwork, situational and competitive nature, those 4 things, if you can take those 4 components of what Coach T is talking about when it comes to practice, you will have effective practices, because most practices in youth sports are reactive. They're not proactive. Now, this is not just general every practice. There are some great coaches out there. There are coaches that work hard. We're not saying anything but that. We're just giving you another layer to think of how can you maximize, keep it fun. We talked about this idea of being developmental versus competitive. The competitive nature is going to come, but whenever you focus on the development and you key in on these 4 components of a solid practice, you're going to get that successful development, and they're actually going to have fun. They're probably going to be more competitive. You're going to have the most competitive team because you're keeping them engaged. It's going to be fast-paced practice. It's not going to be slow. It's going to be competitive. It's not going to be lazy. It's going to be decision-based, not slow or reactive. It's empowering your players as well as empowering you as a coach to do baseball beyond the box score. And that's exactly what we're talking about on this podcast. So, Coach T, those are some great insights for what a successful practice looks like. As we close out, is there any last or closing thoughts that you would have that we didn't necessarily talk about, but it's just burning in your mind of what's one thing that you would give to a coach that's hearing this today about practices?
Well, I'm going to say this because you and I have done this. I know it sounds crazy and most coaches shy away from it, but if you've got somebody that, you're friends with that has a team, in a really close age group, and the reason it needs to be really close age groups so you can use the same size field. So Addison and I both coach teams in the same age group. We practice together. I think practicing together helps the competitive part of it, but also people shy away from that because they feel like, oh my gosh, there's more players. That means it's going to be harder to keep people involved, and it's going to cut down on the reps if I share my practice time with another team. I always felt like we got way more work done when both our teams were together. Not only that, the quality was improved because certainly my kids wanted to look better and show better than your kids, and same vice versa. Your kids wanted to look better and show better than my kids. And so our practice intensity level was great. And they weren't competing against each other in this sense of a game, but internally they were. And then as long as you're running multiple fungos or multiple, operators and multiple groups, it's not a rep issue. I thought we had awesome practices when we practiced together. And what made it good was when we did the team-oriented stuff, bunt coverage, first, third, relay throws, and then we would do the instinctual part of things that we're working on. We had more people available to better simulate, and I felt like it was just a much more clean work, and I think the kids got a lot more out of it. So if you've got somebody that you're familiar with or somebody you respect in your area and they've got a team in that age group, don't be shy about teaming up and rolling practice together as long as you're hitting our, big four components. I think the quality of your practice can be improved and can be benefited by having a second group out there.
I agree. And Coach T, let's be honest, the only reason why we practiced together is because you needed a good fungo and you knew that I can hit some good fungo.
That's absolutely right. Without a doubt.
Yes,
absolutely. I like that left-handed BP too, because I only throw right-handed BP. So
hey, I had it. I was the guy. I could hit the fungo and I could throw the batting practice. But all jokes aside, guys, we just want to give you the best opportunity to have a successful youth practice, to keep it fun, but also keep it developmental and competitive, because it's all going to tie together. And the last thing that I will say, Coach T has some great formulas for good practices. We will be making a PDF that you can take with you. That's going to be in the show notes for this specific episode. So take that, utilize the blueprint. And then if you have success from that, or if you have things that you would like us to talk about, please remember to reach out to us, because we want to make sure that we maximize the efforts for, hey, what's really going on in youth sports? And we want to talk about baseball beyond the box score. And the last thing that I will say closing out is, because the best teams don't win because of what they do on game day. They win because of what they do when nobody's watching, and that is a successful practice. So, Coach T, thank you for giving us the great blueprint for a successful practice in youth sports. That's it for this episode of Fungos and Footnotes. Signing off, Addison Williams and Coach T. We will see you for the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening to Fungos and Footnotes. This episode helps you see the game or your role in it a little more clearly. Share it with someone who loves baseball too. Subscribe, follow along, and stay connected, because the game doesn't just reveal talent, it reveals character, and the footnotes matter.